What is the dumbest thing you have ever spent money on? Story 1. I bid on a guitar signed by Metallica through a radio station auction, where the proceeds would go to a charity. This was over the phone, before cell phones were big and everyone still had home phones, and live on the air. Me and one other dumbass got into a bidding war for this guitar signed by Metallica. I won by making a crazy ending bid of $8,000, $1,500 more than the last bid. The goal was to be the crazy one, and it worked. The other dude bowed out and I won it. I went down to the radio station to pick it up. No party hats, no great job, no greeters, just me and my shame of paying way too much for a shitty Chinese-made Fender with 4 cigs on it. They gave it to me in an open cardboard box with no COA. It's worth about $300 now, probably. Even worse, I played it a few times and wore down one of the cigs. I mean, it's still there, but you can tell it's been rubbed off a little. The only saving grace was that I got to write it off on my taxes and got back like $6,000 that year or something like that. So yeah, used a credit card with 12% interest. Luckily, I had a good job, so it only took 6 months to pay it off. Do I win? Story 2. I was 11 and my dad gave me $50 to spend at the mall, so I wandered into a gift shop and spent it all on an electronic vibrating oinking pink pig. I never played with it after I brought it home. Tried to return it, only to be offered store credit. Story 3. A pair of Christian Louboutin stilettos that I absolutely could not afford and paid for with my whole credit card limit. I wore them twice. They are indescribably uncomfortable. The soles are paper thin, and the red scrapes off pretty much immediately if you wear them outside. I was young and clearly very stupid. Story 4. Technology. Because we buy and test almost every device there is, I must have 100 devices just lying around my office and my home office. I spent the weekend cleaning up my home office only to find dozens of old devices that are rare and unique that never made it. I should donate them to a museum of technology. Story 5. I would say Counter-Strike skins back in the day, but I actually did the math and came out ahead. I unboxed a Sapphire Doppler M9 bayonet and sold it for like $2,300. I have since sold all my skins and haven't played in a while, though. The obvious answer for me is nicotine pouches now. I am 30 and have played baseball all my life, even play now. When I was 12, my coach introduced me to dip, and I dipped from 12 to around 28 years old. Then I switched to nicotine pouches because it's healthier. The problem is that I spend a ton of money because I use 4 nicotine pouches at once on my bottom lip to mimic the feeling of dip. Loved that coach, but hate him for introducing me to dip at such a young age. Such a waste of money. Story 6. As a then 27-year-old, a bunch of Beyblades and some Beyblade arenas. Shockingly expensive. But whip those bad boys out at a Halloween, Christmas, or any other boozy kind of party, and watch an actual pit form around the arenas as grown men and women jostle for their turn to let it rip. Oftentimes, money will begin changing hands as actual betting rings coalesce around the arenas. It's like the ethical man's gladiatorial combat entertainment. Story 7. A soup tureen. I thought a married lady who throws dinner parties and fancy brunches, which I was at the time, widowed recluse now, just had to have one. I searched for 2 years to find one that blended with my taste and looked good with my china, but not so good that it was all matchy-matchy. Finally found the perfect one, bought it, expensive, and put it in a cabinet. And never used it, not even once. Turns out I'm too control-freaky to serve from a tureen. Have to plate the soup so I can get the swirl of sour cream or truffle oil or scattering of minced chives just right. Kept tureen for a few years, then took it to my cousin's annual yard sale. It didn't sell. Story 8. Bottle service at the Wynn Club in LV. Blew roughly $5,000 and only had a few drinks as most of the big bottles were sucked up by females who migrated from table to table. Upside was that Joe Rogan, Pink, and her husband Carrie Hart were sitting next to us and were very nice. Story 9. I went for one of these stuffed animals vending machine with a claw. It was a big machine with a lot of empty space, but a few animals on the right side. Actually, it was so big that it had 2 payment terminals, 2 claws, etc. I paid for it using my CC on the left side and went for the controls. Well, guess what? It was not one big vending machine, but two separate machines with a goddamn glass window between them, and the one on the left that I was using was completely empty. The laugh my fiancé and I had was well worth the $1 I wasted. Actually, after that I went for the other machine and also didn't manage to get the stuffed animal. But my fiancé tried and got one in her first try. Story 10. I once spent $500 on a miracle plant that was supposed to sing when it needed water. The ad showed this happy little plant belting out tunes whenever it got thirsty. I thought it would be a cool, quirky addition to my apartment. When it arrived, it was just a regular plant with a cheap speaker hidden in the soil. The singing was just a pre-recorded jingle that played every hour, regardless of the plant's condition. I tried to return it, but the company disappeared overnight. Now I have a very expensive, very silent plant sitting on my windowsill, mocking me with its leafy indifference. Story 11. I got sick and was stuck in bed and out of boredom, wound up spending money on diamonds for the game choices. I don't know what possessed me to do this. I guess it did entertain me for half an hour or so, but I'm still ashamed. At least it wasn't Candy Crush. Nah, Candy Crush would be less embarrassing. Story 12, Overwatch. Because now I don't have the game anymore, or any of my cosmetics or anything else that I worked or bought because Overwatch is gone, and instead we have Overwatch 2. I spent way too much money on tropical fish, especially some that I knew were going to get too big for my tank, but I really wanted them still. Story 13. I tend to get bored with my cars and get new, used ones every couple of years. The result is I'm in my 40s and have never owned a brand new car. Many people say that's a good thing, but honestly, I would like have a brand new car at some point in my life. Story 14. One of those get-rich scheme programs that imitated J.G. Wentworth. Was conned into it by my roommate when I was in between jobs for a while. We thought we had a good business plan, and the organizers basically laughed at us during the training. We walked away $1K poorer, and all we had to show got it was some training manuals that I found for free online the following year. Story 15. One time. Years ago, I gave money to a moderate political candidate because I liked the policy positions they stated. My donation included my contact information. Shortly after that, I was slammed by dozens of daily texts, emails, and snail mail brochures from extreme factions of that candidate's party. It is a never-ending barrage of bullshit that continues today. I will never give money to political campaigns again. Story 1625-ish years ago, CD-ROMs were brand new. They held 650 MB, at a time when your other media option was usually a 1.5 MB floppy disk. Shortly afterwards, CD burners came out. You could create your own CDs and copy commercial CDs. This was years before broadband, so burning a CD was the fastest way to transfer files and programs that existed. I decided to go out and buy a really good CD burner. It was $200 at a time when you could spend $50 and get a decent burner. If it's not obvious, a year later, the drive was hopelessly out of date. In the last dozen years, I've burned exactly one CD, and that was just to play music on an old radio. Story 17. I want to say DVDs. I had a collection of over 1,500 of them, of which I maybe had watched 15 of them more than once, and maybe 5 more than twice. A good bit of them I had bought used from the local rental store, but still, probably had over $10K into them. Couldn't even give them away when I decided to get rid of them after Blu-ray came out and won the format war. Well, I guess donating then to the library counts as giving them away, so I could, after trying to sell them for even $1, each failed. Story 18. I talked my husband into spending $1,000 on a dog from a pet store 35 years ago, which was a lot of money we didn't have back then. I wanted a nice dog for our young daughter. I had no idea how hard it was to housebreak a dog, and all the work involved. Around a year later, we gave the dog away to someone who hopefully cared for it better than we could. Story 19. In the 90s, I spent $108K that I got from a lawsuit on a brand new car, jewelry, stereos, Disney trips, clothing, etc., and had either given away or sold all of it over the course of 18 months without any help from drugs or alcohol. I think that going from dead broke to having money to burn usually ends up this way, but I also had every reason to believe that I would be dying imminently, and that also had a lot to do with my decisions at the time. It was a fun year and a half, though, and story 20. I put a down payment on my ex's used car. I think I did 50% of the resale value of the car. I didn't drive at the time, and we were engaged, so the expectation we both had was that I'd benefit from that, from Hun driving me around whenever I needed. Yeah, that didn't last long after the breakup. Story 21. Bought a Jaws bust through a targeted Instagram ad in 2021. The photo made it look like it was about 3 feet long, and for $40 I thought it was a steal. Sure, it'd be foam or something, but it still looked cool. It was the size of an apple when I got it. It became a huge meme on TikTok, so it was fun in the end. Still bitter I got duped, though. Story 22. The 6 ducklings I adopted and all the things that went along with that. Trying to make my own pond, setting up a camera, several attempts at a shelter, which was a waste since they ended up destroying my beautiful shed anyway. Heat lamps, pool, straw, bowls, food, cricket treats. Needless to say, they ended up at a farm. Story 23, Funko Pops. Now don't get me wrong, I don't have like 300 bobbleheads. I only bought the Obi-Wan Kenobi Funkos thinking someday they'll be worth something. I have 16 of these things. Well, 32 because I have an open pop and one on the box in 4 cases. Stupid waste of money. Story 24. I'll admit it, an extended car warranty. I bought my car used and accepted the 3-year warranty the dealership offered BC1. It was within the amount I had budgeted for the car, and 2, I was under the impression that it covered routine maintenance like oil changes. It does not, of course, and it's entirely possible the dealership led me on, or I'm just kinda dumb. It ends this November and chances are I won't ever need it. Or from what I've heard, even if something comes up that they supposedly cover, they'll manage to weasel out of paying it. And it will just be $3K totally wasted. Story 25. Many years ago, my landscaper convinced me to put down soil and reseed and plant stuff to replace the dead lawn on the right side of my house. It was a relatively large area, spent a few grand. When it was done, he told me it would need to be watered once or twice a day for 6 weeks. I'm on a well. It was impossible. It all died, and then I fired him. Story 26. Close to when I got my first job, I was introduced to the world of, holy fucking crap, my parents can't tell me no anymore, it's my money, for the first time. Whenever I bought myself something, it was like buying snacks for myself that I'd keep in my room so my brother didn't eat them all in one night. My parents once bought me a 24 case of those really good naked smoothies for work, and my brother drank 20 of them in a single night. He was 12. I told him not to touch them. He promised not to touch them. I am not over that. He only left me the strawberry banana ones that suck. So I didn't really buy myself stuff like clothes or collectibles. But then Comic-Con came around the corner and my all-time favorite character got his first Funko Pop, which was a Comic-Con exclusive. Immediately after its release, it was about $70 online. I waited weeks for the price to go down. It went up to $80. Afraid that it was going to cost well over $100 in the next few months because it was a Comic-Con exclusive. I bought it for $80, only for the very next week, before it was even delivered to me, to be $40. Now, a couple years later, it still hovers around $40 in value. I spent $80 on a Funko Pop because of FOMO. FML, I still love that Funko Pop. He's the favorite of every Pop I have, but goddamn. Story 27. This past weekend at the zoo, I saw these stupid latex, floppy rubber alligator head-shaped hand puppets in the gift shop while I was checking out. My best friend was waiting for me to be done and leave. I impulsively bought the stupid thing without even giving a shit what the price would be. Then proceeded to literally throw it at the side of said best friend's head for a satisfying FWWB splat right there in the front of the gift shop. Best $10 I spent so far this summer? Editing to add, we are both in our 30s. Story 28. A few years ago, I went to the mall with my grandmother and this guy with a thick French accent at a store called Lyonesse, facial products store. Stopped me and asked if I wanted a sample of this moisturizer, and I took one. Then he proceeded to keep urging me to try this diamond skincare on my wrist to see how it works. Long story short, it was supposed to get extra dead skin off after you wash your face. I was amazed by it, but I kept telling him I couldn't afford it and that I had to go. He wouldn't take no for an answer and kept negotiating the price. I finally and stupidly gave in, really, so he would stop asking me and so I could leave. My grandmother wasn't happy with my decision, neither was my mother, and neither was I. I paid $80 for a container the size of a tennis ball, and it was originally $200. Never again. On the bright side, though, it lasted a long time. Story 29. Back when I was in grade school, they had these little scam traps where you could call a number and listen to messages. The messages never really amounted to anything important, mostly just dumb entertainment gimmicks. One was called Dial an Insult, and as a young kid home alone without parental supervision, I was the target market. A neighborhood kid told me if I called this number, somebody would give me a good insult I could use. Dumb kid me dialed it a bunch of times over a week or so. The insults were not all that good, but I laughed because I was just a kid. Then Mom came to me one day asking about all the calls to one number. Turns out there was a per-call charge, and I had run the phone bill up an extra $90 for a bunch of dumb one-liners and yo mama jokes. Story 30 OMG. So one time I spent like $100 on this online astrology course because I was convinced I was going to become an expert and read everyone's charts. But then I realized I have the attention span of a goldfish and never even finished it. So now I just have this random, useless knowledge about moon signs and rising signs that I never actually use. So yeah, that was definitely my dumbest purchase. Story 31. The other day I went to a Steam Boys restaurant where they sell steamed Chinese food and got a bao bun and boba, but the boba is like the same price as the bao bun and I literally brought water. I could have spent half the money I did by not buying the boba, and I didn't even like it that much or finish it, nor was I in the mood for it. Why did I buy the boba WTF, man?